Salutations to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. This is yours truthfully, the main professor and founder of the Sophiatic School of Arts and Sciences, with the 8th installment on Gnostic sabotage in the Book of Revelation. This would be the next to the last talk, with the final and 9th talk going to the dicey subject of the great whore of Babylon. Happens to be a longtime girlfriend of mine, so I look forward to talking with you about her in rather intimate terms. Now, to start out by saying that there's been some mix-up in the sequence of numbering of these talks. They can be found in playlists on my Prime channel, John Lash, and also on Mandela Effect Decoded, which is also my channel, and that was established in February of 2017. When you consider, or someone coming upon these channels at random considers the mix-up, which has occurred 2 or 3 times in numbering the sequence of talks, you might have a laugh about that, and you might have cause to raise the question, well, hey, hold on, wait a minute here. Here's this dude who comes along, more or less posing as a modern Gnostic initiate. He doesn't really come out and say so, but of course, that's what he's assuming that you will assume. And look what he does. He pretends to present completely new information about the book of Revelation, telling you how to calculate the number of the beast, which is obviously a really big deal, and he can't even put the sequence of his talks in the right order. Proof. He must be a complete fraud. And of course, there are people who would make that argument, obviously. And I never counter arguments by anyone who tries to accuse me ad hominem of being this, that, or the other. I will respond to, and sometimes counter arguments that come to me in YouTube comments, and I'm happy to correct myself if I'm wrong, and I'm also happy to discuss certain topics with people who have other views on the history or the intel or information that I'm putting out. No problem. Case in point, by the way, just for the purposes of illustration, goes to someone who commented about my interpretation of the time frame of Kali Yuga. And that individual is obviously educated in the sacred chronology of the ancient Vedas. Actually, it belongs to the Brahminical class who handled that kind of material. And he cites all of these really big numbers. The unit, it's not a number, by the way, it's a unit. The unit 432 appears in various iterations of the yugas in the sacred chronology of India. So one of the numbers that occurs frequently is 432,000 years. That is a traditional number, and there are much larger numbers than that. In fact, the largest numbers that I know actually occur in the iterations, technically the diachronic iterations, that you find in the Mayan calendar. And that goes into something like, what does one of the scholars say? non-nillions of years or something like that. So you have these really high figures. And traditionally, the Brahminical chronology, which, by the way, was picked up by Madame Blavatsky at the end of the 19th century, well, you typically find that the chronology of the yugas runs into hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. That's simply a fact. The evidence is there in the source materials. And that belongs to what is called a canon, C-A-N-O-N. A canon is an established body of teaching, especially if it concerns numbers, geometry, or time periods. The sacred canon of geometry is part of the Western esoteric tradition. So, for instance, my old friend John Michel, who wrote The View Over Atlantis, was an expert in both sacred chronology and metrology. So if you go and study the documents that have been written about the proportions of the Great Pyramid, you find certain unit numbers, certain equations, certain proportions, and that all belongs to what is called a canon of numbers in sacred geometry or metrology. Likewise, there is a canon of numbers regarding the calculation of the yugas. Now, I expect that most people, many people, may have encountered that system from reading the autobiography of a yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda. Now, that book came out in 1945, I believe, the year I was born. And when I discovered it in India years ago, it had a great impact on my life. And I seem to recall that Yogananda even devoted a kind of appendix in the book, it's around here somewhere, or maybe I packed it away, dedicated to the teaching of his master, Sri Yukteswar, who transmitted the canon of the Brahminical system of chronology. And in there you will find these massively long periods. I don't deny that evidence. I've been through it and over it and under it and above it quite a few times over the years. I'd like to make it clear on this topic that I respect certain canons. I respect what is found in certain ancient sources on this topic, which happens to be a specialty of mine, relating to the calculation of the precession of the equinoxes. So I've written a book on Dendra, and as I've said in the talk on the timing of Kali Yuga, which is not in this series, by the way, I arrived at my figures for Kali Yuga by the comparison of 5 or 6 different systems of ancient chronology. So I want to make it clear that I know about these systems, and I respect ancient systems of knowledge to a degree. There is a saying that you find, there are references that you find, again, in the Hindu writings, particularly, for instance, in the Maha-Nirvana Tantra, which is a document, I think, late, dated to, I think, the 11th century or so, although it may go back to the 9th century. In any case, it carries forward an ancient tradition going back much further. But in the Maha-Nirvana Tantra, it says explicitly in a number of passages that in Kali Yuga, all the previous teachings of spirituality become obsolete. And that includes these canons of geometry and chronology as well. There was a long comment on that upload. I can't bring it up now because I don't want to take the time to go look for it. But someone cited these thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. And they knew what they were talking about. But you know, there's a saying, how does it go? Imitation is the highest form of flattery. Well, I don't merely imitate the ancient sources. I go through them, I grind them down over and over again, I rework them, I distill them, and I bring them forward to something that is pertinent today. I'd like someone to tell me how time periods calculated in hundreds of thousands of years could be pertinent to today. So rather than say imitation is the highest form of flattery, I could jumble that phrase and say innovation is the highest form of respect. So I respect the ancient systems, but I innovate upon those systems to bring forth something that can really be actionable today, that can really make sense. The way that I've worked with the calculations of Kali Yuga, using a kalpa, by my definition, as 25,920 years. Now that's not traditional. That's my definition. The way that I've calculated it and worked it out, I can reduce the elements of that time frame down to a decade of our time right now that we're living through, down to a month. I can reduce it down to a day and even a minute in a day. That is how I work the time frame. I bring it into the present by innovation. Anyway, that's rather a digression because the Kali Yuga talk is not in this series. Why did I get on that? Oh yeah, I can't number the 8 talks in the series correctly. So how in the fuck am I going to be able to calculate time periods running into thousands and thousands of years? Well, I'll leave it to you to work that out. So on that note, let's proceed to the material of this talk, and that is receiving the 2 marks of the beast. Have you received the 2 marks of the beast? What does it mean to receive the 2 marks of the beast? Is it something desirable, or is it something demonic? Well, let's go to the word. Everything is in the word, charagma. Now, I often mispronounce Greek words by putting the accent in the wrong place. So I have said charagma, but no, it's charagma. And charagma is a common word in Greek today. Do you know what it means? It means a notch, like the notch that is in an arrow. When you look at an arrow, it consists of the arrowhead, the shaft, the feathers, and then there is that part of the arrow at the end that fits into the string of the bow. That's charagma. That's a notch. So this word appears twice in chapter 13. It appears in verse 16 for the first time, and then again it's repeated in verse 17. So, in the first instance, the text says that the lesser beast, who handles the power of the great beast, gives the mark in 2 ways, on the forehead and on the right hand. And then in the 17th verse, there's a further qualification, namely, that those who do not have that mark cannot gather and trade, not buy and sell. Of course, that goes against the vastly popular notion that AI is a technique for delivering the mark of the beast, right? I remember that originally the mark of the beast, going some years back, it seems like going into medieval history now, the mark of the beast was associated with barcode. So you could see memes on the internet of people with a barcode on their forehead, and the meme says, there it is, the mark of the beast. You will be marked like a beast. You will be branded like a cow because you're merely cattle. You're merely produce to be sold, to be bought and sold. Some years after that, there was a variation of the same meme referring to, what is it called? The RFID chip, the radio frequency ID chip. So the idea went around that the authorities and the globalist masterminds want to chip everybody. And the protest went out. Oh my God, it's the mark of the beast, the chip. Now it's gone into a third stage where the mark of the beast is delivered in the form of what? It can be a gel, a tattooed gel on the arm, or it can be delivered through the tip of a needle. So that is how, in 3 sequences, this meme has evolved over what, the last 20 or 30 years. So far, so good. But as you know, I'm not following that interpretation. I don't consider the great beast, the lesser beast, and the scarlet woman to be evil and demonic forces. I don't consider them to be correlates or symbols of the AI technology, which presently is the main tool for the Great Reset. I don't view them in that way at all. In fact, as you will know by now, I consider that the Gnostic sabotage embedded in the book of Revelation presents the opportunity to know the forces, the supernatural forces available to humanity who can actually oppose and overcome the globalist system. And I repeat, as I've said before, that the system of globalist technocracy is just the final version of theocracy. So Judeo-Christianity is a paradigm of theocracy, rulership by the gods or by those who are descendants or the specially chosen of the gods. And of course, the technocrats today, like Klaus Schwab, obviously consider themselves to be gods who are destined to rule the world. And I believe George Soros has come out and said so in plain English. I would have you note that there is a specific ethnicity connected to this modern form of theocracy, technocratic theocracy, you could call it. But that fact is consistent with the historical background going back to around 1800 BC and Melchizedek, the clone-like entity who founded the Abrahamic religions. So the root of modern technocratic theocracy is the same as the root of the 3 Abrahamic religions. It's simply morphed into something today that doesn't look necessarily like a religion, but it is in fact the ultimate toxic mutation of that original religion, which came out of the cult of the Tzaddikim, the ultra-righteous ones. So what about the 2 charagma, the 2 marks of the beast? on the forehead and on the hand. How are these marks delivered? Would you know if someone or some power was imprinting you with these marks? Well, how about this? How about I say that you already have those marks? That every human animal, due to the way we are designed by our divine parents, Sophia and Thelete, according to the Gnostic narrative, has already endowed you with those marks. Remember the mad monk's dream. What happened in that lucid encounter that Ioannis had with the Gnostic initiate, Sophradis? She showed him something. She didn't put the 2 marks on him, but she showed him by her gestures that he already had those marks. And I would do the same in speaking to you today. I would do as she did. Now I have to warn you about something. The 2 marks are quite different. The mark on the forehead is easy to explain, and I think you'll get it. The mark on the right hand, that's somewhat more difficult to explain because it involves one of the deepest secrets of Gnostic intel. It involves the knowledge and operations of the plasmic double. So I'll get to that at the end of the talk. But first, let's look at the mark on the forehead. What is that? I say you already have it. What is it? Well, go look at a child. Not a disturbed child, not a child suffering from stress and trauma or from vaccine-induced autism. Go look at a child who's a natural child. Sane, happy, peaceful, active, curious, lovable, affectionate. A child that still has its boundaries, that knows how it feels to be touched and caressed in the right way and in the wrong way. A child that has strong and clear shame boundaries. In other words, look at the ideal human child as our species is designed to be. And as your eyes scan over the child, you may have noticed something. You see the beauty of its form. You see the beauty of its hands, its feet, the way its little body is shaped. You see the spontaneity and the joy of life that's present in that child. All of the bubbling moments of life to come, bubbling out of the wellspring of the life of that young child. And when you look at the child's face, did you ever notice something about the forehead of a child? That there is something particularly attractive about it. And it's a natural and spontaneous gesture of affection to stroke or kiss the forehead of a child, isn't it? You see, what we all know, those who are sane human beings, sane and loving by nature, what they know is that there is innocence in the face of a child. And that innocence is not just a quality we attribute to children. It is a true force. There's a force of innocence. And the center of that force is the forehead. And you could say, in a way, that the presence and the beauty of human innocence shines from the forehead of a child, and it might also shine from yours, no matter what your age. That is the first mark. That is the mark that Sophronis showed to the mad monk. She didn't give it to him. She showed him that he already has it. It is a primordial signature of the innocence of the human animal, the innocence of a lamb. And that factor of innocence can be considered, in Gnostic terms, to put it crudely, as the presence of divinity. Human innocence is divine. It is a divine quality, and it shines from the forehead of every genuine, free, loving, honest human animal. You could say that the gesture of the Gnostic initiate was an act of healing. She saw and she comprehended the dementia of the mad monk. She knew how he must be suffering in that dementia and how terrible it must be to have such hallucinations, which of course Gnostics don't have. We just don't hallucinate ever. She knew how terrible it was for him. And so that action she performed in a lucid dream was a parting gesture of healing, a blessing really, a benediction. Now it comes to the other mark. I remind you that charagma means a notch. Well, you can place a notch on your forehead. In fact, it's typical among some Indian sadhus that I used to wander around with when I was back in that country long ago. Typical of them to wear marks on their forehead. And I believe the Vaishnavites, or the worshippers of Vishnu, had a yellow mark on their foreheads, which is like a Y, but could also be a V. So you could put a V on your forehead. You would put the point of the V right at that part of your forehead that goes down to form your nose, and then the two prongs of the V upward. You could wear that V on your forehead. That's a notch. Think of this precisely. A notch is not something that causes a place to be. It's something that identifies where something is. So if I'm on the beach and I'm trying to detect coins and things with a detector, and the detector goes off, I can make a notch or sign on the beach. The notch does not cause the treasure to be there in the sand. The notch merely marks where the treasure is. Hence, the notch on your forehead really marks what is already there. Your innocence. But what about the notch in the right hand? Well, hold up your right hand and look at it. Keep the fingers together. Keep the thumb out, sort of at a right angle, and look at it. Of course, if you spread your fingers, there are 3 notches between your 4 fingers, right? But look over to the right. Look at the space between the index or pointing finger and your thumb. That's a big notch. It's kind of L-shaped. But if you stretch your thumb out, you can see it's more like a U shape. That's the notch in the design of your hand. Now, how about you do what I say, just for fun, and you do something rather weird, maybe. You bring your hand up, spread your thumb as far away from your hand with the fingers closed as you can, and look at that notch. And you bring your hand up and you put it in your mouth as far as you can, and you bite on that place in your hand. Just try that. Doing that, you can see how your upper and lower jaw, which form two curves, actually fits into the notch of your hand. So press it in as far as you can, like you're doing when you're at the dentist to get a mold made for your teeth, and bite. Press down and hold the bite for a moment. Now take your hand away and look. You see that there's a mark on your palm, a semicircular mark. That is the charagma of the mark on the right hand. You've located where it is. Now you can see that that's a semicircular line formed by the line of your lower jaw, correct? So what next? Of course, I don't advise you to bite too hard, but bite down hard enough so that you can leave an impression, a red line that lingers for a moment, then it goes away. Looking at that line, which sort of resembles a crescent moon, you can see that there is a border. The extreme limit of the crescent is a border. You can only go in so far with your jaws. Now picture that just below that border, in the fleshy palm of your hand, there is a spot. That exact location is significant. This whole exercise takes you to that exact location. So you can take your finger of your other hand and you can press it right there, and you can feel where it is in the fleshy part of your palm, right underneath the line that has been made by your bite. Not on the line, right underneath it. The Gnostic initiate knows, that is to say, the accomplished shaman, that there is a spot there that also is part of your design. Actually, it's a hole. But it's not a hole in your physical material body. It's a hole in your plasmic double. So what Sophrades did was to show him something that only initiates know. You can only know if you are able to go into the supernatural, into the nagual, if you are able to navigate in paranormal reality and keep your sobriety and sanity. You can know things like this. And that's the only way you can know them. And once you know them, you must know them in a way, you must hold that knowledge in a way that is coherent with other knowledge that you have. So it's one thing for me to say to you that you have a hole in your right hand, and that is the second mark of the beast. But it takes quite a lot more for you to know the significance of that hole. So briefly, I'll see if I can put it across to you. And this is brief, and this is the best I can do within the limits of time. Anyone who explores the so-called field of esoterics or occultism or looks into theosophy or dozens of other genres that could be named encounters the terms astral double, astral body, etheric double, and other variations. But I'm not talking about any of that. I'm telling you about the plasmic double. Now, I can't go into an elaborate exposition of the differences, but I'll give you one example. When you dream, or when people have out-of-the-body experiences, they are actually navigating in the astral body or astral double. The character that acts in a dream, in one of your dreams, is your astral double, the counterpart to your actual awake physical being. And that is a kind of mirror of what you actually look like, but it is an aspect of you that only occurs in the dream state. So it has also been called the dream body. And many, many books have been written about this subject. Well, to cut to the chase, the plasmic double is not any of that. You can imagine, or you can start to imagine, that the plasmic double is something like the mold that would be formed if some kind of liquid was poured into the mold of your body. So you're standing there, and there is the skin of your body. It's the outline, the shape. Now imagine that inside your skin, around all parts of your body, around your fingers, between your toes, down your back, imagine that the interior space enclosed by the shape of your body was empty. And then imagine that there was a little, what do you call it? Like when you open a bottle of sweet and sour sauce, you flip a tab at the top of the bottle, which allows the liquid to come out. So imagine that there's such a tab at the top of your head, in what is called a fontanelle, and you flip it open, and someone pours inside of it a kind of gel-like substance. And then imagine that the substance entirely fills your body. It takes on the shape of your body. It is molded to the shape of your body. And then imagine that it can stand alone on its own, independent of your body, although it is constantly in the natural state, interpenetrating your body. That's the plasmic double. And the substance of the plasmic double is something like a liquid crystal. It has property of platinum because it's rather silvery, but it also has the property of diamond. And you will find allusions to this body in Buddhism under the term the adamantine body. Adamantine, meaning crystalline or diamond. So you have a plasmic double, and it's always with you, and the shape of it is exactly the shape of your body. But that plasmic double also has its own independent existence. So you're always in two places at once in the universe. You're in the place where the plasmic body is at unity with your material body, and you are simultaneously in the place where the plasmic body is independent of your material body. I told you this was deep. So it's coming up on 40 minutes here, and I don't really want to go on any longer, and it's not correct for me to introduce such a subject to you. Such a momentous secret of the true esoterics and the true occultism of human reality without following up, but I can't follow up. So I'll just conclude with this other detail. I'm describing the plasmic double. I'm guessing that you may never have heard of this before. The plasmic double, which is like a supple crystalline gel, it is composed of such a gel, can also be compared to a Klein bottle. Ever heard of a Klein bottle? Klein. Go look it up. So a Klein bottle is a shape that only has one surface, and yet it has an inside and an outside. Likewise, your plasmic double only has one surface. The inside surface and the outside surface are the same. And in the structure of the plasmic double, there are 5 holes. And those holes correspond to exact points in your physical body. One of those holes is the hole in the right hand. That is the other mark of the beast. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.